Coming up on this episode of Greyhound Nation, John explores the sport of open field coursing in the United States with guest Steve Downs. Stay tuned, The Nation is next. This is Greyhound Nation, episode 25, recorded November 15th, 2021. Steve Downs on open field coursing in the U.S. Greyhound Nation is a podcast for Greyhound enthusiasts produced by Greyhound enthusiasts. To learn more about our show and its hosts, visit our website at greyhoundnation.dog. That's greyhoundnation.dog. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Greyhound Nation podcast. I'm Michael Burns, and now here's your host, John Parker.
Welcome back, Greyhound lovers. Our guest today is a fellow I've known for a little over 20 years. We first met on the internet back in the old days of the Greyhound L discussion list. And that really takes us back. That's pre-Facebook and just really the very beginnings of social media sighthound-related discussions. We had some very interesting and fun discussions about the differences between hunting and coursing, and Steve was always a gentleman about it. He's very knowledgeable about greyhounds and coursing in America, and so we thought we'd have him on to talk about that a little bit. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks a lot, John. I'm really happy to be here, and I feel kind of subpar compared to some of the guests you've had, but we'll try to clarify any questions that might be out there.
Well, let's put it this way: I think of you as the Sir Mark Prescott of American coursing. So. You're up there in good company.
I think that's greatly exaggerated, but
So you're a second or third generation Greyhound man?
Actually, fourth generation on my
Fourth generation. Tell us a little bit about your family's history in greyhounds.
Well, my great grandfather on my mother's side had greyhounds in Texas. They used them to catch jackrabbits, and on my father's side, my grandfather had greyhounds out here in California. He came from Arkansas. When he came out here, he was kind of a hunter, and there wasn't a lot of woods and squirrels and stuff around here like there were in Arkansas. And he met a gentleman at church by the name of Dean Webb that was a greyhound guy, I think a track dog guy actually, and kind of got him going on hunting. He got hooked on it and started chasing rabbits.
And what this was not coursing under rules, right? This was pure hunting.
That's correct. I think most of it was hunting, at least in Southern California. I know they did have some clubs with rules and that going on, but all the folks that were my family knew and that were hunters.
And did they chase anything other than jackrabbits?
No, there's a whole genre of people out there, as you know nowadays, that are really into coyotes and foxes and stuff like that. But we were primarily hare coursers as a that's what I'm into today too.
Yeah. And then what's your earliest memory? How old were you, and what's your earliest memory of involvement with greyhounds?
My earliest memory was actually the dog that was told it was mine, so the dog was named as mine, and I named him after my favorite cartoon character, Felix from Felix the Cat. And my first memory of coursing, even though I probably went prior to that, was when he caught his first rabbit. And it was a great course. My dad's dog, who was always in the lead, was leading the whole course, and this a rabbit was about to escape into an orange grove, and just at the edge of the orange grove, Felix leaped over an orange tree branch that was sticking out and landed on the hare on the other side. And I think I was hooked from that moment on. I think I was 4 or 5 when that happened.
Oh, wow. So was Felix black the way Felix the Cat was?
He was a black brindle.
Yeah.
He didn't look just like Felix the Cat, but he was close enough for me.
What was his heritage? What was his pedigree? Did he have some racing in him and some coursing and that sort of thing?
Most of the dogs back then were hunting dogs and unregistered dogs. So I think they had, they had some Greyhound in them. I think they probably, some of the old dogs had some Staghound in them. It seemed very common in the old days. Dogs were 8 or quarter Staghound, and just unregistered Greyhounds. I don't think those guys paid a lot of attention to what the lineage was, as much as like, hey, that dog's pretty good at catching rabbits, and he wish he was a little faster, and this guy's dog's a little faster. So what do you say we hook them up and see if we get the pups we want? So he was unregistered, as most of them were back then, and yeah, he looked pure Greyhound to me, though.
And how long did you go out with him chasing jackrabbits? Did he do it to a ripe old age, or what was his history?
I think my dad got rid of him, actually, John. This is one of the, like I said, he was named as my dog, but my dad would get a few dogs, and then he'd get tired of them. They were barking too much or whatever. Give them back to my uncle. My uncle's really been the real force in the family. He was really kind of always running the show, had the most Greyhounds. He still courses today. And so we had him for a year and a half, and I think he went back to my uncle. So I don't really remember all that.
How old is your uncle now?
I think he's 74.
Wow. And he still goes out and walks with the Greyhounds and hunts?
He still goes out and walks the desert. He lives in the desert, and he still hunts, I think, once a week at least.
And was that a lifelong passion of yours in Greyhounds? In other words, was there a time when you kind of, maybe as a teenager, you found it boring, or you were more interested in girls or something like that, and you got away from Greyhounds, or have you been with it since the age of 4 with Felix?
My priorities never got messed up, John. I've never put any Greyhounds, so let's just get that straight. My wife may disagree, but I always liked it, and my uncle, that was so really the backbone of the Greyhounds after my grandfather passed away on my dad's side. He moved back to Arkansas. So when he moved back to Arkansas, the folks that were kind of had dogs out here, that kind of quit going, but a lot of people still had dogs. So keep in mind, it wasn't just my dad, my uncle. I had 5 uncles, and my mom also had 2 or 3 sisters that had Greyhounds too. So everybody I was related to had Greyhounds. So even though there wasn't this person getting everybody together every weekend, there were still Greyhounds around. So even as a kid, I was always begging people and trying to figure out a way to talk them into going out in the field and going hunting. When I was 9, 10 years old, I was trying to figure out a way to convince people, blackmail people, whatever I had to do to get out in the field with the Greyhounds.
And what's your earliest recollection of going out and doing formal coursing, or coursing under rules, as it's called?
Well, the first time that I had done that was in 1990. And what led up to that is I became good friends with a guy named Les Lopez. And him and I started hanging out together. We decided to go hunting together. We knew each other through the years, but finally realized we lived close together and started hunting together. And we got along really well together. And we both enjoyed to drink beer together and had a great time. And he had already went to organized coursing, I think the year before, or maybe a couple times before, but he had knowledge of it, and he wanted to go on a big trip. So he was like really trying to talk me into going to Wyoming with him. And man, that just sounded great. I just want to go chase rabbits. So he convinced me to go to Wyoming with him. And that was the first time that I went. And there was the club was called NOFCA. One of the larger clubs in the United States for coursing. And they had a meet in Rawlins, Wyoming back in 1990. And that was the first one I attended.
And NOFCA is the National Open Field Coursing Association. Do I have that right?
That is correct.
Tell us a little bit about the history of NOFCA, when it started as an organization and how it got organized.
I think it started in 68 or 69. And I think it was kind of Borzoi enthusiasts at first that really got it together, but really the Saluki folks were really the ones that were the drivers of it. If I remember correctly from the stories I'd heard, I wasn't there then, but I think it was originally called OFCA, just OFC, and then then the N was added to it. But anyways, they started in the Merced area, Merced, California, which is kind of interesting because we both have heard a few stories about how Merced was kind of a hotbed of coursing long before that, early into the early 1900s. So I have a feeling that that was kind of always going around, and this was just one of those organizations that was formed. But it may have been the first one that was really formed to run trios and to run other breeds. I think all the coursing clubs prior to NOFCA, and I can't say for sure, but I think they were more geared for greyhounds specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, Charlie Blanning's written extensively about the coursing in California, a lot of which was park coursing and closed coursing around San Francisco and in those areas, and how popular it was. And then there seems to have been a gap. You know, that kind of faded out in the 20s and maybe the 30s, and as racing took over. And then there seemed to be no open coursing at all in California, at least. They had the enclosed coursing at the NGA meets, and then all of a sudden in the 60s, NOFCA springs up, and you know, we're off to the coursing again with formalized coursing under rules.
Yeah, I think you're correct. You know, and I think that a gentleman once asked me, you know, because a lot of these hunting type events like that there's big money involved in them, the coon hunting and stuff like that. And I know that coursing is not really a hunting venue, but a guy asked me about, well, you know, how much, you know, if there's a lot of money involved in it. And I alluded to the fact that I think the money went with the racing greyhounds. I think it became so much of a better, because we don't have park coursing, or we don't have fields like they had at the Waterloo that were predictable and people could stand in a certain spot and kind of view the coursing and everything. I don't know that we had that set up other than the park coursing, you know, out there in the more open field areas. So I think greyhound racing really became the successor to that park coursing, and then the actual open field coursing. I think it kind of was just left behind because of that. It wasn't something easy for the masses to do. I mean, you've been out here, John, too. Sometimes you end up walking a long ways to complete an event, you know.
Let's talk a little bit about how NOFCA and American open field coursing's organized in terms of how the actual meet is held. It's walked up coursing as opposed to the driven coursing that you have with beaters and, like you referenced, the Waterloo Cup. Tell us a little bit how walked up coursing in America works.
Okay, well, we can start with just the format of the hunt itself. One thing that's different too is they run in trios, and so there's 3 dogs, and they put colors on them: yellow, pink, and blue, to distinguish them in the distance. But so those 3 hunt dogs are out in front with a hunt master, and he's the guy that is almost like the slipper, I guess, right? In England, he's the guy that determines whether the hare is proper and has the right amount of law and all that, and he's the one that gives the go for the hunters to turn loose. Meanwhile, the rest of the people that are at the event and maybe not in that run or have dogs involved in that run are called the gallery. Now they're in a line behind those hunt dogs and off to the side flanking them, and they're methodically walking in a straight line through the field to try to flush wild hares, jackrabbits. And if it's a usable jackrabbit, the hunt master will call tally ho, and they'll let the 3 dogs go, and then the judge would go to work trying to determine the winner of that course.
Yeah, we probably should define a couple of terms. One, we've alluded to this, even though they're called jackrabbits, they're actually a member of the hare family, and they're bigger than the cottontail rabbits that most of us in the U.S. are familiar with.
Yeah, that's correct, and forgive me for going in and out, but the like people that chase them, they call them rabbits too. You know, everybody will,
right.
The fact, oh yeah, I went out and chased a rabbit this last week. They really mean jackrabbits. Nobody is really seriously coursing cottontails. Cottontails run in a hole, usually within 30 feet or so, or duck into something. They're not really open range animals like hares or like jackrabbits. Jackrabbits live out in the open. They dig like a little burrow in the ground or under a bush, and they get away. Their first defense is letting you walk by them. They can hunker down and you'll walk by a lot more than you ever see jump up and run. But the ones that do jump up and run, they don't usually go to holes. They usually beat the dogs to whatever the closest escape is, heavier cover or a ditch or an area where they can get through a fence.
Yeah, yeah. That's the second point I actually wanted to make, was that these aren't captive hares. These aren't canned hunts. These are just chasing jackrabbits that live out in the wild, living out there naturally, and it's just a matter of walking across their habitat and seeing which ones will get up and run.
Yeah, and they're, because they are in their natural environment, very few actually are really caught. They do on occasion catch them, but most of them get away and live to run another day. It's just they know the terrain. They're fast. Most jackrabbits have much more endurance than greyhounds do. So if they can elude the greyhound, at the start, or for however long it takes for the greyhound to wear out, they'll outlast them and just outstrip them in the distance.
Let's talk a little bit about where coursing is held. It's all in the western United States, I believe, isn't it? Because we don't have jackrabbits east of the Mississippi.
I think you're correct on that. I think somebody said there's a pocket of English hares in northern New York or something like that, but I don't know if anybody's chased them. But I think I've heard there's a small population up there. But they're in the western United States. All of our running's kind of been California, Nevada, Arizona, Utah, Wyoming, Montana. I know some people have also ran in Washington and Oregon years past, but all the way up through Kansas. There's a lot of guys that course in Texas. I see there's just recently in the last few years on Facebook saw there's a large contingency of folks chasing jackrabbits in Texas and Oklahoma as well. So, yeah. Now,
in the NOFCA organization, NOFCA is actually, as I understand it, a club of clubs. In other words, NOFCA itself doesn't necessarily host coursing meetings. Member clubs host coursing meetings. Have I got that right?
That's correct for the most part. It is a parent club, and it does hold hunts as well, mixed hunts, but most of the hunts, the majority of the hunts, are held by the minority clubs, greyhound clubs, Saluki clubs, whippet clubs, rare breed, which include Ibizan, Galgo, Silk and Wind hounds, Afghans. There's Borzoi clubs. So all the dogs in NOFCA are registered purebred dogs. It's kind of a requirement of NOFCA. The goal of NOFCA when it was started, I think, one of them was to have a venue for these other breeds, but the other was to try to make these other breeds that didn't have a venue like racing to stay capable of doing what they were bred to do, and that was to course hares, and so that's really the deal is, and why they've kept it to purebreds is the goal was to make purebreds better, to where Borzois could still catch rabbits and whippets and Salukis and all that stuff. So, but they're back to your original question. There's several clubs. There's 2 greyhound clubs. I actually run both of the greyhound clubs, and I've been involved with all the various greyhound clubs through the years, the past 30 years or so.
So all sighthounds are basically eligible to run in open field coursing, American open field coursing.
Yeah, I think for the most part, there may be a couple of odd ones, John, that aren't included, but most of them are, and they do have that venue. Yes.
And is there a season to the coursing meets held throughout the U.S.?
The coursing season mimics the regular hunting season we've followed for years, and it's really like once it starts cooling off in October, and then you can start getting the dogs out and get in the fields, and it ends towards the end of winter and towards the beginning of the breeding season for hares in the springtime. So by February, there's the coursing's over, and the goal is to just leave the hares alone for till next October.
Yeah. And you have what are called mixed hunts and breed hunts. Is that right?
That is correct.
Tell us about the difference between those two.
Okay, the breed hunts are exactly like they sound. They are all of the same breed. So a greyhound breed hunt would be nothing but greyhounds competing, and a mixed hunt um, would have a mix of breeds. So Salukis, Borzois, Whippets. Those are really interesting too, because there are some dogs that have some other traits, but it also becomes quite challenging to the judge, as you could imagine.
Yeah, we'll get into that in a little bit because you're a judge as well, right?
That is correct, and
Yeah.
I knew you would get to that too. The difference, because there's a lot of different theories out there. So yeah, we have a lot to talk about.
Now, so let's get back to your. Before we go there, you the NOFCA organization has a big meet toward the end of the season called the Grand Course. Tell us a little bit about the Grand Course.
The Grand Course is you have to qualify for the Grand Course by accumulating a certain amount of points through the season. So the goal of the Grand Course is that the cream of the crop are the dogs that are at the Grand Course. So the top greyhounds, the top Salukis, the top Whippets, Borzois, et cetera, are invited to this hunt based on qualifying for it by the amount of points they've accumulated. The Grand Course is a hunt that goes over 3 days. It's 3 runs usually, so you got 2 runs against your own breed, and then a percentage of that breed moves forward to compete in the finals, which is a mixed portion of that hunt.
Yeah, those are the 2 coursing meetings I've been to in the U.S. I've been to 2 Grand Courses, and I had a great time at them.
They can be a lot of fun. That's a heck of a hunt, because you end up walking a lot that weekend, but it's a heck of an accomplishment. I was asked if I won the Grand Course recently, and I haven't. I haven't participated in nearly as many as most people would think. I've been in only 6 or 7 or something like that through the years, only because it's such a daunting hunt. That is a monster hunt, and it's an accomplishment, though. People remember who won the Grand Course, so it's hats off to the people that have pulled it off. For me, like I said, I haven't been in a lot of them, or I just didn't have the right dog, or when I had the right dog, I didn't get the right hair. Like I said, these are wild hares or jackrabbits, so you may not get the one that runs out in the middle of the field and gives your dog a good opportunity to put on a good show. You may get the one that runs 50 yards and slips through the gate and on to bigger and better things.
Well, no matter where you are in the world, coursing has a luck as an element. There's no question about that.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Like it said, when I was younger, I used to be, and I'm ashamed to say this, I feel really bad about it. I used to be tougher on hunt masters sometimes, because it seemed like I'd always end up in the corner. And well, then, the way you usually remedy people with attitude problems like that is you make them do it. And after I hunt mastered for a while, you realize, well, everybody's not going to be in the dead center of that nice wide open field when that rabbit gets up. You can't just stand there all day and hope they come to you. Somebody's going to be on the edge of the field. Somebody's going to be in the corner. And that's just the luck of it. You never know where that rabbit's going to go, or even what kind of rabbit you're going to get. There's jackrabbits. I've seen jackrabbits greyhounds couldn't turn them. I'm serious. I've seen jackrabbits where good, fast, racing greyhounds could not turn them.
They just couldn't get up close enough to them to force a turn.
No, and I'm talking, we stepped on it. That rabbit was 10 feet away and he got smoking. It was a soft field, so, the dogs were digging in a little bit, but I've seen several jackrabbits that just greyhounds could not pull them down. Jackrabbits are fast.
Yeah, no question. So let's go back to the 90s then. When you went to your first Coursing Under Rules meeting, what was your reaction after having done more pure hunting all those years? What did you think of that first time?
Well, I'm happy you went back to that, because that was actually a pretty good story. And so it was the first time I got to meet Jade Bowman, which is a very well-renowned greyhound coursing person in the United States, and we can get on her a little bit later. But I got to meet Jane Bowman. She was very nice to me, very accepting. Chris Mason, also a very prolific coursing person that's won the Grand Course once or twice, but a lot of people know her in the Saluki community and the long dog community. And so we had this draw. We're real excited. It was a tough hunt. You know, it's hard to find rabbits in Wyoming sometimes. But my dog won the hunt. So it was very challenging. But when they hand you that blue ribbon at the end of the day, and you're 22 years old, and you've really always thought about how you love greyhounds and how much you've enjoyed it, and how much faith you had in the dog. Let me take a step back too. I was supposed to bring these two certain dogs, and one of the dogs I was supposed to bring got injured just a day prior to going to Wyoming. The dog got hurt in the pen, ran into a pole, hurt her back leg. Next morning, it's still bad. She's not going to get well. I had to bring an old dog, like an old favorite dog of mine. The dog wasn't real old, but the dog was like a 5-year-old or something, and been through some injuries and stuff herself. And I had to bring this older dog of mine, which was my favorite dog. That's the dog that ended up winning that hunt.
What was her name?
Her name was Sally, and Sally was past her prime, meaning in ability and also in desire. Like Sally got to the point in her life where she'd ran a lot of hard miles. I was tough on my dogs when I was younger. I'm a little smarter now, I hope. But so Sally didn't always put out at that time. I don't know if it was that white-tailed jackrabbit or just the fact she sensed we were in a competition, but Sally ran that day like I hadn't seen her run since she was a young dog. She went into the first turn and actually had pulled the tail off of the hair and threw it in the air. Like wow, you know, and I knew instantly that while Sally came to run, this is, you know, all of a sudden Jane was really interested in my dogs and my and everything. So it would have took a lot to beat me down off of it after that. It was a first experience, as you can imagine.
Yeah, I can see that early success can get lots of people hooked. It happened with me with lure coursing, and that was a pretty good feeling. At the end of the day, you have people coming up and congratulating you, and you know they didn't know you from Adam, and you brought this older dog, and she, you know, exceeded expectations, and it's a great feeling.
It was really wonderful. It was just one of those moments with greyhounds I've had through my life, and that was definitely one of those top shelf moments. I'll never forget that. I can visualize that run like it happened yesterday.
Now, did Sally repeat that refreshed viewpoint of coursing, or did she kind of go back to her old, more jaded ways?
She came in heat right after that. So that's another thing too. A lot of times females, as we know, they run pretty good right before they come in heat.
Yeah.
But she came in heat after that, and after she came out of heat, I brought her to Merced. Merced opened a couple weeks later. That's when coursing was still in Merced, and I was really thinking, man, I'll go up there and straighten them out in Merced. Now, I don't think Sally ever got in the lead again, to be honest. Merced.
She went out on top, you know.
yeah, that's for sure.
So where did you go from there? Having had this great success, unexpected, felt pretty darn good. Where did you go from there? And what was did you resolve to get more involved in coursing under rules?
Yeah, like I said, it was a couple of weeks later, we went to Merced. That was the opening for hunting out on the West Coast then. Like I said, those Wyoming hunts were a little earlier in the season because Wyoming cools off a little sooner than it does out in California. So we went to Merced. Even there, I got second place with a dog named Dingling at my second hunt. And so I did pretty good. Jane Bowman was adamant about making me part of the organization and getting me involved. Like right away, she was just like, I got to Merced, and I'm just trying to figure out where I'm at and everything. And she was like, you're going to apprentice hunt master today under Herb Wells. And Herb Wells is another guy, a very prolific guy in coursing and taking pictures and everything. I know you saw a lot of his pictures.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Herb was a great photographer. Great guy, too.
He really was, and he was very knowledgeable. And and honestly, I really caught him on his last leg as far as probably hunt mastering or anything like that. He was kind of not healthy enough to do it not too much after that. So I apprenticed hunt master Huntmaster under Herb Wells just in my second coursing event in Merced, and it was very tricky. Merced was full of barbed wire, so you really had have your act together as a Huntmaster in Merced. And Merced, it was an accepted fact that there was a lot of barbed wire, and dogs were going to run through the barbed wire, but you really had to be the right distance from it and all of that, and dogs had to know the fence were there. So it took a skilled Huntmaster to hunt around barbed wire. I'm happy to say now I don't go anywhere near barbed wire, but that's the way it was back then.
What was the terrain and just the general footing like there in the Merced area? This was an agricultural area, I take it?
Yeah, it was. At that particular field, which was the San Felipe Ranch, also something that everybody that's still around from Merced is gonna perk up when they hear that name. It was actually it was bull pastures in pens. It wasn't the nice alfalfa fields that were in Merced. Now, Merced was also full of wonderful alfalfa fields. And I'm talking alfalfa that was, 2 inches deep, and the jacks just were laying everywhere in it. You could just walk, and just jacks kept coming up, and just gorgeous. They had gorgeous alfalfa fields. You couldn't even see the other end of them. Giant fields, and it was like running at the park or like running at the Waterloo. No obstructions. You saw every inch of those courses in that alfalfa Merced.
Fairly flat?
Yeah, totally flat.
Yeah.
The only variation in that would be, irrigation canals and stuff that were cut into that, but they weren't obstructing any view. The dogs would go down into them, pop up on the other side.
So was this after the alfalfa was cut as hay? Were you coursing in after the last cut of the year?
Yeah, exactly. So you walk along the checks, they stay a little brushy. You probably noticed that they stay with a little more cover. You walk on those checks and they pop out of there.
Yeah. Well, what progress did you make after that in coursing? Did you just become a regular and you hunt mastered, and what else did you do?
I got pretty into it. I started getting the first thing I realized that to be successful at it is some of the dogs were a little faster than the ones I had. My dogs were bred more for hunting purposes, so they a little more durable, a little more endurance, and I realized that some of the greyhounds going to the coursing events were just a little bit faster, so a little hotter bred. So my first thing was, I wanted to keep winning, so trying to get some faster dogs and get more involved. But I did keep going pretty good for those next couple of years, and then tapered off when I first got married and had a son, and but then kind of picked it back up after we got him on his feet, so to speak. So.
And what was the typical heritage of the coursing greyhound in NOFCA back then? Were they specifically coursing bred, or were they racing greyhounds that had been kind of transitioned over to coursing, or what was the lay of the land like there?
I think that I actually came along when it was a little bit of a downtime for the Bowmans, like. We'll get back into that, go back to their big dog to kind of change the whole American coursing scene. But anyways, there were pure track dogs. There were people that brought show dogs out there, and there were people that had combinations of both. Just to go back in the history of NOFCA a little bit, everybody at first had just racing greyhounds, and Charles Alexander, prolific coursing person and photographer, he once told me the story that he's a saloon owner, and he said, we used to just have to wait. Greyhounds go up and turn the rabbit a couple of times, they get tired, and then Salukis take over and have this big beautiful course, and till it ends they stay in the lead. And then Gene Bowman bred a dog named Strider in, I think, 1972 or 71, but Strider was half show dog and half track dog. His mother was a track dog, his dad was a show dog, showbred. And I should say that I don't know how successful of a show dog he was, but he was AKC registered. Maybe that's a better way of putting that.
Yeah.
But he was of that lineage anyways. And Treetop Hawk was like his grandfather or something. So he was out of show dogs. But anyways, Strider the way Charles Alexander described him, he had the speed of a racing greyhound, he had the agility of a whippet, and he had the endurance of a Saluki. He said Strider never let the Salukis pass him. No matter how far it went, Strider would remain in the lead to the end of the course. So it's kind of a weird thing, because you think about the show breeding. I don't think I feel a lot different than you do about a lot of them, John, but I have seen value in them in the fact that they preserve something by accident there.
Yeah.
It's every line, but
I suspect that back in the 70s, they weren't as exaggerated in structure as you see them today. Do you remember much about that?
I think so. And I think if you see a picture of Duke, Strider's father, he doesn't look as exaggerated or anything. He looks much more like a dog with more racing blood in him or whatever. But, and you think back to the 70s too, you're a lot closer to even when the split happened in the early 1900s or late 80s.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that seems like a long time, but there's still probably dogs that people, kept closer to those original coursing lines. Because show dogs were coursing dogs. They were all coursing dogs, till 1880 or 90, or I don't know what the date.
Yeah.
Somewhere around there. So somehow they preserved that ability. The endurance is unbelievable. And I saw it repeated too. So you think, well, maybe it was just a fluke. But George Bell did repeat it a few years ago, and he had to breed a couple times to breed some of the flaws out of them. But those dogs that he had, just the second breeding down from when he went back to the show dog, Fanny, Ruby 2, or some of the names of them, they're incredible dogs. They weren't as fast as racing dogs, of course, but they really could run several minutes and hold their speed. I mean, there was no Saluki going to run them out of gas.
Yeah.
And
so it sounds like Strider was kind of the foundation of the whole half and half concept and the movement then to breed these half and half greyhounds.
No doubt about it. Strider was the grandfather of all of those dogs. I mean, so many grand courses have been won. I think there's like 18 dogs in his lineage that have won down. They won the grand course down from Strider. But like I said, it wasn't just that endurance, but the turning ability. The dog stayed on the dogs out of him. Those first couple of generations, they stayed on the rabbit. I mean, they were a couple of feet from the rabbit. I don't care what that rabbit did; they were right on his butt. And
well, that's what I wanted. That was my next question about Strider's kind of breeding propensities, and was he used extensively as a stud dog?
He definitely was. Like I said, I think that I took a few notes, but I think there's I think almost every successful American coursing greyhound now, or up until since Strider, has Strider's bloodline in it, other than a few rare track dogs. That and just to get back to that, the track greyhound is almost impossible to beat when they're healthy. And then they're out there and you haven't overran them yet. They're just unbelievable on a hair. It's just really hard to keep them healthy, and not a lot of them have that ability to track the rabbit, and the endurance. They've been bred for a long time to run 30, 45 seconds. So you really have to try to build them up on that. But there's been some track greyhounds that were just unbeatable. They were really something else.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about judging. You ultimately became a licensed NOFCA judge. How do you go about doing that?
Well, I was doing it for a while, and then as we'd stand there and describe courses, they thought that I knew what I was talking about when I was describing what I saw. So they encouraged me through the years to do it, and I finally started apprentice judging. I was lucky enough to apprentice judge under Dr. John Bouchard. You know him as well.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah, and he was very thorough and a very good teacher, which he was a teacher, I think, at Princeton, right? So he was a great teacher and taught me a lot of stuff. And I ended up getting my judging license. And
what year would that have been, Steve?
I'm going to say 2008 or something like that. So not that long ago, maybe a little earlier, maybe 2005.
Now let's talk a little bit about where the judge stands in relation to the dogs, and then what your judging criteria are.
Well, the judge The judges usually set up in a strategic spot where they think that he'll have a good view of the course. So a lot of these fields that we use for coursing are just if you've chased hares enough, you know kind of where they're gonna go. So you try to set up the judge in a position where he'll be close to where the run's gonna take place. He's usually elevated on top of a vehicle. I have a Land Rover that I have a cage on top of it and sit up there in a chair with an umbrella, and it's really nice. But the goal is to put him in a spot where he's going to have the best vantage point of the entire course.
Now, I know in park coursing, the judge will often position himself on his horse, typically, where he thinks the first turn will be. Is that carry over at all to open field coursing in the U.S.? Do you try to get near where you think the first turn might be? Or is that too unpredictable?
No, I like to be there, but I think we really try to, because I think a lot of the runs end up going a little further. I think we try to be where we can see both ends, because it is open ended, for lack of a better term. I think that you need to be where you might be able to see a mile or something, because a lot of rabbits run that far. So I like being really close to the hunters because those little nuances and stuff at the beginning. Of course, the first turn, of course, is such a huge deal. That is the criteria for speed. That really determined who got there. But I don't think we're quite as close as they would be on the first turn. I think we're too worried about being able to see the end of it.
Yeah. And what percentage of the course do you watch through binoculars typically?
I try to stay close enough where I don't have to watch the hunters with binoculars walking in the field. And I know judges do that, but that's very taxing and tiresome, looking through binoculars, watching people walk around. So I try to be able to see the beginning of the course without binoculars, and then pull it up once it gets, a couple hundred yards away or whatever. I mean, sometimes I'll pull them up quicker. I don't know what that distance is. You just instinctively kind of know if you've done it enough. I'm gonna have to put the glasses up. And then sometimes the rabbit's coming at you, take the glasses down. They'll run right by you. So
yeah.
But I bet we probably, if you averaged it out, I bet I judge 85% with the binoculars.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and talk a little bit about the judging criteria that you use, the categories and so forth.
Well, the categories, they're speed, agility, endurance, also for take or touch. In America, there are a few points allowed if they actually captured the hare, and then work is another category. Speed's 25 possible points, agility 25 possible points, endurance 25 possible points, touch or take 5 points, work 20 points. So you pretty much are trying to work with that stuff. Like you said, the first turn is very important. If it's a fair slip, in England, the slip's pretty much always fair, right? Because they got a slipper or closer anyways. When you have three individuals slipping, the rabbit may be closer to one side than the other, and you get the break. So that kind of takes a little bit of the value out of the first turn. But if you're judging it and see it was kind of a fair slip and you can evaluate that correctly, it's very important. So like I said, that's kind of the speed. The dog that's up there in the beginning is the fastest dog. And after that, agility, who's not blowing turns and actually can stay with the hare. Endurance is pretty self-explanatory. And then, like I said, touch or take is a category they don't have a lot of other places. And I think it's from the fact that jackrabbits are pretty hard to catch. I put a little bit of value on it. And you say the other ones work, which I don't understand. Works, that's a category that's in there, but work is actually very close to agility. So
yeah, just back and forth turning the hare and forcing turns after turn on it.
Yeah, and a lot of it fools a lot of people too. Sometimes you'll see a lot of. I've been close to judges that are watching the dogs follow a hare through a field, and he's kind of turning on his own, and they think that's turns, but a real turn is that rabbit definitely he had to change directions from where he wanted to go by the dogs. He was overtaken by the dogs, and to go the other direction.
And then do you assign a number score to each dog in each course at the end of the course?
Yeah, you pull a few points. Like I said, those numbers I threw out there are the highest possible number. So the fastest dog you ever seen in your life would get a 25. So anybody else below that, not that you're judging against this dog that might be the fastest dog you've ever seen in life, you're judging against the other dogs in the field. So I mean, you'll pull a few points from there. I'd say just an average. Well, like a score with minimal or almost no work is like a 69-ish or something like that, 68 to 70, and a little bit better course, 72. A really good course is in the high 70s. Um, yeah, I don't think that I've ever put anything much higher than that. So that's
Yeah.
pretty close together, really.
Highest maximum score is 100, but no dog ever scores that.
That's correct. Yeah. You'd have to, yeah, I don't see anybody handing that out, right?
And then it's organized so that if, assuming you have enough hairs, each dog runs twice on the day.
No, there's prelims and there's finals. So they'll draw up dogs in trios, depending on how many dogs you got there, broken up by threes, how many runs you got in the prelims. They'll pull the winner of all those courses. So say there was 4 prelims. You'd have 4 winners, and then the judge would still have the ability of possibly pulling up a couple other dogs, and he can rerun them all if he wants. But most of the time, it is hard to find hairs. They'll usually not create another course. So you have 4 winners. You're going to have 2 courses, right? Because you're going to have trios again in the finals. So you got a trio already, but you still got that extra dog. So more than likely, the judge is going to pull up 2 more dogs to run in the finals, 2 other dogs that did well. But he can make the choice too. Like, you know what? I didn't see anything out of anybody else. I'm going to run 2 braces in the finals. And that's acceptable. You could do that. But
So he has a great deal of discretion about which dogs advance on other than scores. In other words, the ones that are the obvious winners advance, and then he can select kind of subjectively some additional dogs that impressed him.
Yeah, but I would think that you're right. He really has no choice on the winners of the course. I mean, I guess he did because he made him the winner. But the winners of the courses are coming up. That's the way the rules are. The other dogs, you're right, it's a little subjective. I mean, mine would make sense if you saw my judging book and wondered why I pulled up the next 2 dogs. I guarantee you the next 2 highest in points. So the points did determine that they were, what if, like I said, we go back to our example for 4 dogs there, those next 2 would be number 5 and 6. They'd be in 5th and 6th place at that point in the hunt. So yeah, that's what would lead me to bring them up if I thought they needed to come up.
Now, talk a little bit about the challenges of judging one breed against another, especially as a Greyhound man.
Well, that's very challenging because it just with the point system, and it doesn't matter what point system you use. If you use the point system here, you use the point system in England, even. If a Greyhound ran up there and he put 4 turns on the rabbit, yeah, that run up maybe is a couple points, right, overseas or whatever. So that's a little bit more. But say a Saluki took over that course and he turned it, 6 times, and we're adding up points. Well, you're at a tie or you got the Saluki ahead. But that's where you run into a little bit of trouble because I've always been under the impression and feel that, matter of fact, I know what happened at the beginning of that course influenced the end of the course. So if you just sit there, I'm just going to dish out points the way they roll out. Well, Saluki might get behind that rabbit, and he may run it forever. He may turn it 40 times, and get this astronaut. He may get 100 points, right? If you end up adding it up like that. And that's why you have to use a little bit of common sense on that because, you might be able to get a German Shepherd out there and turn it 45 times,
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a tough deal. And even within breeds, John, if you think about, okay, here's one Greyhound course, goes out, dog turns the rabbit 3 or 4 times, beautiful course. They get the rabbit. Oh man, that was just a wonderful course. A lot of speed, a lot of agility, beautiful run. Next dog, he runs up and picks it up on the run up. Well, that wasn't maybe not as pretty of a run, right? Or it wasn't exciting, didn't have the turns and everything, but how can you, in theory, not be punishing that dog that just made no mistakes? He saw the rabbit out in the distance, ran up there, and they caught the rabbit. No turns. Turns are like mistakes, really, right? I know the greyhounds used them to break the rabbit down and everything, but the dog that really was kind of more perfect was the one that didn't do anything, run up there and grab the rabbit. So that crosses all genres, coursing genres, if you think about that. That's not just the Saluki Greyhound argument. That's the Greyhound argument even.
Yeah.
And so, because the dog, if you think about it, you've heard me allude to this before, what are the dogs trying to do? And the dogs are trying to get that rabbit.
Yeah. Do you factor in kind of on the spot subjective judgments about the strength of the hair? For example, in your example, that second course where the greyhound ran right up on it, maybe it was a little slower, maybe it was younger, maybe maybe. Kind of.
Yeah, you're right.
Do you factor that in?
That's where I refuse to be subjective, and maybe it's unfair, but I've always told people, hey, that's a hunt master's problem. If he called the wrong rabbit or there was something wrong with it or whatever, that's his fault. I'm judging the dogs. I'm not judging rabbits.
Yeah.
I don't, because I got a hard time one time at a grand course. I gave a pretty good score to a dog that caught a probably subpar. And but I'm not judging rabbits. Up there and scooped down, turned it a couple times, scooped it up. Man, I scored him out of the building. Like I thought he deserved. And people later were up to me. Oh, that rabbit wasn't a good one. And that's not my problem. Talk to the hunt master.
Yeah, right. I think if I was judging, I would have a hard time overcoming my greyhound bias because I see that in lure coursing and lure operating. I'll see the occasional Saluki or even an Afghan hound or a Borzoi that really, I think to myself, boy, that dog runs like a greyhound. But I don't know if I could overcome that prejudice when they're running against other breeds, with a great deal more frequency than they do in lure coursing. Have you had trouble with that, or is that something you can kind of put out of your mind?
I think maybe if you think of my background too, kind of being a hunter first, right? I think that I appreciate what Salukis do. Now, the modern Saluki is not like the old days Saluki. These Salukis that are coming overseas now, they run like greyhounds. They run up and force turns, and it's a different animal. If I don't even want to get into that conversation. You get into that, they're like, oh yeah, these were like unknown tribe of Salukis or whatever. But I have a feeling there's greyhounds over there floating around helping out with those Saluki. But anyways, just avoiding that, the true Saluki run, the most beautiful Saluki runs are pure Saluki runs to me. And what I mean is where the other dogs really don't interfere with it. I've seen Saluki runs where the old school Saluki get behind the hare in a big old area, and he wouldn't even worry the hare. He'd stay 50, 70 yards behind the hare, just cruising. And then he'd run that rabbit and watch it go, and it'd get a minute and a half into the course, and he'd just see that little bit of weakness. You see that little bit of weakness, and that Saluki go up there, start floating around these nice soft turns, and then just run that. And there's no turning back. Nothing can outrun the Saluki. The Saluki is the fastest animal on earth after like 2 minutes or 2 miles.
Yeah.
And I believe that. And it's an incredible thing to see. But like you said, back when you're comparing the two of them, I've given courses to Salukis where Salukis and Greyhounds ran together many times. I've judged 6 grand courses, and I think I've given the winner, the Saluki was a winner 3 of the 6 times.
Yeah.
Greyhound guy. But the Greyhound goes up there and turns it 3 or 4 times and runs out of gas. And the Saluki still does this incredible feat where he runs it over hill and dale and multiple turns through an orchard and pulls the rabbit down. It's impressive. And if you just really are watching that and seeing it and realize what you're looking at, you realize that was an incredible feat. It's not that hard really to get over it when it's not just a clear, okay, the Greyhound turned it 4 times, Saluki turned it 6 times, who was the winner there? That's a different ballgame.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit, Steve, about you're a Greyhound breeder as well as an open field courser and judge. How old were you when you bred your first litter of Greyhounds?
I think I was probably 18, 17 or 18. I bred my first litter of greyhounds. And
Who did you breed to who?
I bred a dog that I had named Pepper that I got from a guy. I actually got her from my uncle, but she originally came from a guy named Mike Smith, who was a track dog guy, prolific track dog guy. And Pepper was an outstanding dog. And I bred her to a dog that I thought was equally as good. I don't think I ended up with the right pups in the litter, to be honest with you, though. I think that another dog actually produced those pups.
How did that happen?
Well, I was, like I said, 17, 18 years old. We had a couple of male greyhounds there. I tried to keep one away, and he was black and white, and the one I bred to was a fawn brindle. And we all know now that doesn't mean everything. I know now that you can produce different colors, but all those pups look just like the pups look just like that black and white male father. And I'm pretty sure I was right about that. One more note, John, back to the grain course too. Because I jotted it down just so people know the history of the winners. So of the grain course, there's been 49 grand courses. 33 have been won by greyhounds, 13 by Salukis, and 3 by Whippets.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. Yeah, and, you hear the argument that American open field coursing is really a Salukis game. They're favored because the terrain they're running in is kind of similar to their country of origin and so forth. But then invariably, when somebody makes that argument, that statistics will be brought out to say, well, greyhounds have won it a lot more than Salukis have won it.
They have. I think the biggest reason in recent years why the Salukis are very good. Like you said, can't knock them. There's been some incredible Salukis in the last few years, but there's a lot less greyhounds at the grand course. We used to go to the grand course, and heck, there'd be 30 greyhounds. And now there's one or only a handful. So there's many more Salukis competing than our greyhounds that have that chance of getting that run in the middle of the field instead of the corner, like we talked about earlier. So,
getting back to your breeding program, were you exclusively breeding for yourself? Were you breeding to sell some puppies? What were your goals?
I have never to this day bred a litter for anybody or anything than myself. And I'm not really a breeder. I do breed a a greyhound litter. God forbid, litter every few years, and usually it's just when my coursing hunting dogs are getting old, and I need to refresh them with a younger crew. Then I choose to breed, and I'll give away some of the pups to close friends and sell a few, but I have sold very few compared to how many I've actually kept or given away through the years.
Yeah. And do you typically breed among your own stock, or do you go outside and maybe you like a stud dog that you saw run or you judged and that sort of thing?
Well, that is always the greyhound coursing world in America is getting much smaller. So that used to always be the way that we did it was you'd see somebody, Larry Lopez or Jane or whoever had greyhounds, but now there's only a few coursing greyhounds that are conditioned to run or bred to run the way we run out here left. I find myself not being able to outcross as much that I want to get the traits that I want. So the next few years are going to be challenging for me. And I know that there's some good bred dogs. I know you have some good bred dogs, and they have coursing background from England, which is interesting. But I'm finally getting to the point where I can't see the dogs run that I'd like to see. I got lucky in the fact that George kind of retired, and I ended up with his good bitch and was able to just breed a litter that wasn't, too close together or anything like that. And I do have a nice litter now. But after that, I'm going to have to face some tough decisions because I don't want to inbreed. We know that's the worst thing to do.
Yeah.
That outcrossing is definitely fresh blood, and you want to do that. But I'm fearful of giving up some of the traits that I've acquired. Being able to track the hair. There's very few greyhounds that track the hair well. They blow the turns. They just keep running straight, turn around, and start. jamming again in the direction the hare went. But a lot of the traits that make a good coursing greyhound, they're very rare.
Well, who's left? I mean, George Bell, like you said, he's retired. The Bullmans have passed away. Larry Lopez, I don't think's doing it anymore, is he?
No,
Who's breeding coursing greyhounds nowadays in America?
that's about it. I think we really got to look at people that have maybe, so you end up becoming a pedigree junkie and looking for dogs that maybe have some of those pedigrees you like, and possibly looking at outcrossing more to some of the Irish or English coursing dogs. The last few years, a lot of those seem to be a lot hotter bred than what we run out here. You look at the dogs; they're bullets, man. They're bred to get up on that rabbit, but it's going to be a challenge for them to hang in there on a jack that strings them out for 2 or 3 minutes in the field. And, or can they handle our terrain? We run in the desert a lot out here. And
yeah.
So it's a reality that, but we'll have to cross that road. Like I said, I've been very intrigued by some of your dogs. And I've seen Audrey Shaw had Hattie out here. She did pretty well. The thing that was really interesting about Hattie was, Hattie was really fast. She was faster than the rest of the dogs we were running right then, as expected. But the thing that was unique about Hattie compared to like an American track dog was Hattie could recover and run a bunch of chases, which makes sense if you think about how she was bred to run, like the Waterloo or whatever. But that was kind of distinctive between her and good track dogs. Good track dogs are still track dogs. They're real fast and they might beat everybody. But say you get a couple no courses. I can remember this one time out there with Audrey and Hattie where we just couldn't get it together. We get a rabbit up and they'd lose it. One time the dogs all ran into each other and fell down. It was just a crazy morning, right? It's kind of a gray day, hard for the dogs to stay on the rabbit. And we ended up running, 2 or 3 little courses just to get those 2 courses off in between there. And Hattie ran the same every course. That was very impressive because I don't even think mine were running the same, which I think are much colder bred than she was. But you could see she had that ability to run the same type of course multiple times.
Yeah. I'll always be grateful to Audrey for doing that because it was always my theory that an English bred coursing greyhound, if raised from a puppy in California or out west and run on that terrain and trained on that terrain, let's see how that dog does. If you brought an adult one over from England, you wouldn't expect them to be able to run as well on the Western terrain as they did on those nice soft peat fields in England. And so Audrey, took that program on and I think proved through Hattie that, if properly trained and brought up and acclimated to the climate and so forth, that the dogs could do pretty well.
The other thing that's interesting about them is they're definitely closer to coursing bred greyhounds than just a random track dog or a show dog. So there's no doubt about that. The English coursing dogs they kind of changed the way they ran, and I've seen it happen out here too. There at the end, they weren't really tracking the rabbits good and turning them. If you watch videos from the dogs in England in the 50s and that, compared to at the end, it's a totally different run. Like they were in on the rabbit. They showed pretty good endurance. And what happens is, because I saw it kind of in a smaller envelope out here, amongst our little group, is speed. And somebody comes out with a faster dog and they whip your butt, you know what I mean? Because a lot of the times you don't end up with nice, big, beautiful horses. Maybe a short sprint to the fence. Well, those speed dogs, they win those. So you're like, wow, I've been getting whipped here. I'm going to give me a faster dog, and then you do, and you start winning. The next guy, he goes back, he gets a faster, and that just keeps going. And then you end up losing a lot of the great traits that makes them a great rabbit dog.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the direction that we kind of went everywhere. I don't even, I even heard conversations about track greyhounds, where people think, oh man, the dogs 20 years ago were better. They weren't faster, but they were better dogs at just that genre. And it's definitely true. I've definitely seen that in the coursing world, and I believe that it's true. I think you can get yourself in a speed competition, and nobody likes to lose. So I've been caught up in it too. I went up dogs too, and we were getting after it. But I don't know that we got better when that happened.
Let's segue that to talk about a little bit about how you bring pups up. I love seeing your pictures and video that you'll post on Facebook, just going out for a day with young pups, to let them see what the adults do and maybe give chase themselves. Tell us a little bit about how you bring up a young greyhound, when you start taking them out, at what age you take them out, just to have a fun day out in the field, and take us from there.
First off, I think the ultimate way is if you have the property to actually let them run loose and course and stuff like they did in the old days. But out here, I don't have that ability. Where I live, I have a little bit of land, but not enough to keep pups or get them running or anything. So, basically, when they're old enough to walk safely in the field without the grown dogs running them over, I take them out, and I always say it's better off to learn about that ditch at 2 miles an hour than it is at 40 miles an hour down the road. So I get them out there as early as possible, and they run and play and they start tagging along. You got to start watching them though when they get a little over 6 months old, because they start developing speed. All litters are different though. Some litters really put out speed, and you got to really back them off, because you get about 7 months old. You got to kind of, if they really are keeping up with the big dogs, you got to put them up, because they'll get hurt. They're not meant to take that pounding at. Their bones aren't fused, or all that technical jargon. I don't know all that, but I know that you need to put them up till they're about 15 months old once they put out that speed. Like, so some of them never do. Some of them don't really develop that early speed. Like, you'll have clumsy big males and stuff, and you kind of keep them going longer. You really just got to watch it yourself. You see them keeping up with the big dogs. You got to put them up. They're going to get hurt.
Yeah. And so during that time, when they get that 6 months or so and 15 months or so, what are you doing with them during that time? How do they develop their fitness? And
I take them where there's not hares. I have at places where I live, in the woods and that, where they can still run around and explore, but they can't really get going. They don't have open ground to get speed going. I'd like to road work them and stuff more. I think that I've seen people do that, and that's they've done really well with that. I know a guy that biked his dog, David Isley, won the Grand Course a couple times too. He biked his dogs. They looked incredible. Took away that energy, and they built them up with that. I've never had the time or energy to do that with all the dogs that I have, and so I just look for opportunities to take them out where I can run them around, but not in the open flat fields of
yeah. And then you typically put them into competition at about 15, 16 months.
Yeah, that's kind of the goal. Once I know they're okay, they're over that hump. My pups right now are in that time where I still got to watch them. I brought them back. They're 15 months old or 16 months old right now, and I actually entered them in a competition, and one of my pups won the first competition they were in just last month. But I noticed the rest of mine are getting little weird injuries and stuff, and I just put them up again. I got to wait till they're 17 months old.
Yeah,
for them is really good, and I think that's part of it. I think they have a little more speed than I anticipated.
As we come to the end of our time here, Steve, tell us a little bit about what's the best coursing greyhound you ever bred?
The best coursing greyhound I ever bred was probably a very short-lived dog that broke its back, Alifair, and she's actually was a sister to the grandmother of my pups I have now. Alifair had the whole package. Alifair was fast. She had good air. She could turn. She could read the rabbit. Well, she could catch a rabbit anywhere too. She catch them in the brush in the desert. She caught rabbits where I never caught rabbits, and that was the first indication that I had a special dog. And then I went to NOFCA, and she beat Fanny, George Bell's Fanny, who won the Grand Course, a very prolific dog. My pups are down from Fanny now. But Alifair was probably the best dog I ever bred. And I have another really great story, a quick story about Alifair. So, John, that a few years back, 10 years ago, or a little more than that, 12 years ago, 13 years ago, I had lost a litter to parvo, and acquired a couple of Salukis from friends that bred Saluki litters and were dying to give me Salukis. So I had a couple of Salukis.
I remember those Salukis.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed them. They were wonderful dogs, and I was having a good time with them. I was going to coursing events with them. I was going out chasing rabbits with them. So I had 2 Salukis, and I had a long dog mix. Well, only one pup out of the litter that died of parvo that I had lived. Now, Bootsy's alive, but my uncle had her. Out of the ones I had that popped parvo, I had one that lived. Well, she would go chasing these Salukis out and get lost and just seemed like a pain. She didn't fit in the Saluki program I was really doing. And one day when she was about 7 or 8 months old, like she's nothing but work, right? This Greyhound pup, the only Greyhound I got, Greyhound pup, just a pain in the butt. I'm constantly having to take care of her. She's getting lost and everything. Well, 7, 8 months old, I go out with my son. We jump a rabbit, and she just shot past those Salukis like they were standing still, turned the rabbit about 5 times, and then the course developed and everybody was in it and everything. But it made my hair stand up on my back of my neck. It is right now. I'm talking about it, on my arms, the back of my neck. That's why I do this. It ain't that tag along and run it down. I enjoy chasing rabbits and hunting and catching rabbits, but that's why I first started it. That's what I love. I want to see that Greyhound get up on that rabbit, make it dance.
Yeah, yeah.
And Alifair wasn't only the best Greyhound that I ever bred. I think Alifair saved my Greyhound life, for lack of a better term. She got back on the straight and narrow.
What are your plans for the future? Are you going to keep at it?
Yeah, I'll never stop. So I'll keep at it until they run me off or whatever. But I plan to keep chasing rabbits. I enjoy the organized coursing events and everything like that. I also thoroughly enjoy just my weekends with my wife, going out in the countryside, exploring around, chase a couple rabbits, go out to breakfast. It's just something I thoroughly enjoy and something that I plan to do until the day I die.
Yeah. What about hares? Are they as prolific as they once were? Do you have more trouble finding them? What's the game population like?
It seems like it's kind of a down year out here where I live right now, but I still have no problem. I've been doing it a long time. I know my way around. I can always find a couple rabbits. To find enough for an organized coursing event, that's a lot bigger challenge. That's different. But just to go out and find a couple of rabbits, I'll never have no problem doing that.
Yeah.
I know where there's one sitting right now waiting.
Well, best of luck, Steve, with your newer litter, and I hope you'll keep breeding, and you may be the coursing Greyhounds man for the next decade or so. So I wish you a lot of luck, and I know you'll do the right thing by all your dogs. So keep it up, and thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me. Had a wonderful time.
That's it for now, Greyhound lovers. Join us for the next episode.
Thanks so much for listening to the show. If you're not a regular listener, be sure to follow Greyhound Nation wherever you get your podcasts. We're also on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just search for Grey Nation Show. Follow us, and you'll get notifications every time we release a new episode. If you like the episode, leave us a review on our Facebook page or your favorite podcast app. You can also send us feedback or questions via the contact form on our website at greyhoundnation.dog. That's greyhoundnation.dog. This episode was produced in collaboration with host John Parker. Our theme music was composed and performed by Dimitri Taras. Special thanks to our guest, Steve Downs. I'm Michael Burns, and you've been listening to Greyhound Nation.